This is a vice grip. It's attached to a rope, and it's used to hold the mouth of a catfish while you're skinning them. This is a needle nose pliers, and that's used to peel back the skin in some cases. This is a sharpening steel, and it's used to put an edge back on the knife after the edge has been worn off by use. This is a fillet knife, kind of a standard one. It's got a flexible blade. This is a pair of skinning pliers, and it's used to grab a hold of the skin of the catfish when you're peeling it back. And this is a filleting knife, filleting gloves, so that you protect your hands from being cut by the blades of the knife while you're filleting fish.
Down through it, flip this fish around, just use about that front 1-inch part of our knife. Gonna roll it up with my thumbs, put the knife blade right on the rib cage. Now, some people use electric fillet knives. I personally have never used one. I just like a regular knife. Now we're gonna lay that fish over, come down till we just get to the skin, and then we're gonna make kind of saw motions like this to get rid of separate the skin from the fillet. So there we end up with a fillet like so, another 45-degree angle. Roll it right down. Roll it up over the rib cage. There we go. Now there's two ways of doing this, because you still end up with a little bit of red meat right down the lateral line. The other thing you're going to have is some small bones right at the front, probably a third of the fish. There again, right along the lateral line. If you run your fingers along them, back towards his tail, you'll be able to see them or feel them there. So we want to just make a small knife slit. Essentially, we're going to cut a small V right out of the center part of the fillet. That's where those bones are going to be. Another method that a lot of fishermen use, I usually just cut mine like that. I'll see if I can do this. Usually they're going to make a slit on each side of the lateral line. Can make this work. This is what they call zipping. Usually I should be able to just tear it right, comes down along here. Yep. This is going to essentially get rid of those, here's those bones that I'm taking out right there at the bottom part. So you end up with two pieces of fish like that for your fillet versus just cutting a V notch out of them. So.
And you're still going to cut them up in the
yep, you bet.
Pieces so they all cook at the same rate. They would hook the lip on for doing this.
Tell people most of the time I'm skinning these fish by myself, so I like to rig this up, vice grip them. Basically what we're going to do with these flatheads is just give them a little zip around the edges in a V, flip them over on their bellies. I tell people, especially these fish when they get a little bigger, I like to cut them that way, but I'm going to just barely nick the hide right down here to his belly, right at the base of the tail. I'm going to make maybe another small slit on each side of there to help with the skin process. I tell people if this fish was fresh, he would come off a little bit easier than he is going to after he's been iced down and frozen like this. But most of the time, if this fish was fresh, I don't like to pull his skin off in pieces. I want him to come off all in one piece. Oop. Like he should go about right there. There we go. Now we're going to flip him over, grab the belly. Put this to corner of our pliers if we can. There we go. Now I tell people kind of a trick I learned off commercial guys. Instead of dulling your knife, we're going to use the base of our knife because we hardly ever use the base of it to fillet with. We do most of our work with the upper tip. Use the base of our knife, just notch his backbone right like that. Grab it both ways like this, pull it, break it away, and pull away from you. You get most of you'll break the head off. Take a lot of the insides or intestines with the head when you pull it off. Now you can just take your knife in here and get rid of all the intestines, and we got a fish that's ready to be cleaned up. Another thing I'm going to do with most all of my fish rid of the air bladder. I want to take care of this dorsal spine, so when it gets frozen or washed up, nobody's going to stick their hand on this dorsal spine. So we're usually going to make a small slit on each side of the dorsal spine. Take our catfish pliers, break away that top dorsal spine and discard that. But I tell people to make these fish edible now. I would never eat, or I never have, say, eaten catfish when they're fresh, just skinned out like this. I'm going to soak these in ice cold water. Usually if I skin fish, I maybe have 20, 30, 40 catfish I've just skinned out. I'm going to throw all the fillets in a cooler with a couple milk jugs of ice. Throw a bunch of ice cubes on it, because you can just barely start to see it on this fillet here. What I'm talking about is it's going to be kind of a yellowish gold color right up along the top of the fish's back. This is where his head would have been, and this was the tail of the fish. It's always on the top of the back. If you were just ahead and got this fish, all that yellow fat, and that gives it that yucky fish flavor. Some people like it. I want my fish nice and white and clean of a fishy flavor, but that's all going to cook down into the meat if you were to just head and gut this fish and cook him whole. And it's a little harder today to show you, but it's going to be a strip of meat about like so that we're going to throw away or discard off of these two fillets. Since this fish was a little bit bigger, if this was firmed up, and it's going to be a little harder to show you today, but a bigger catfish like this here, I want to get rid of this silver outside to really clean this fish up. I'm going to just barely shave my knife. Want to get rid of any red meat and that silver outside lining. If you do this to your catfish, you're going to end up with a lot better product. I tell people, yeah, you're going to have to sacrifice and throw a little bit of your fish away, but at least you'll end up with a fish that's worth eating when you get all done with it. So like I say, these channel cat here will usually reduce, or will result me in about 25%, so 100 pounds of live channel. And then I'm going to sit here and dice these pieces up about like so. Because if you fry a whole catfish fillet like that, this very center part's going to be kind of mushy. The outside tips are going to be kind of crispy critter before y'all get all done. So we want to have all our pieces fairly consistent, right like that.